All right, Jan, go ahead.
Hey, what's up, peeps? This is Jan Phillips, and I'm on Your Superior Self.
That's got to be the best intro I've ever had on the show. I've never, ever had anyone call my audience peeps. And from now on, they have to, just because of you.
That's good.
Jan, thank you for joining the show.
I'm so happy to be here.
Your book, Still on Fire. I have the uncorrected proof. So, I mean, people can't really see it because of the legality of it.
Yeah, they could see mine. Still on Fire, Field Notes from a Queer Mystic. I took that picture of myself in Italy.
I don't even know where to start. Your story is just so amazing. I love every second of it. It's like this true story of someone who is struggling with their identity, who they are, their entire life. And I think most of us are doing that, right? I think a lot of us are doing that, struggling with our identities and who we are and trying to portray out to society what they want to see and be the mirror for society, not our individual selves. But I could say now, sitting in front of you, after reading your book, I'm looking at Jan Phillips as Jan Phillips. I mean, it was a very powerful book. I mean, you entered the convent of the Catholic Church and they kicked you out because of your sexuality, essentially.
Yeah.
And that bothered you for your entire life, as it would anyone.
20 years it took.
20
Not my
years.
entire life. It doesn't bother me anymore.
I'm sorry, 20 years.
Years.
But let's talk about that. Let's talk about you joining the convent, because as you say in the book, a sister saved you from taking your own life, correct?
Yes.
Can you talk about that?
Yes. Approaching puberty, one realizes who one's falling in love with. And when I realized I'm falling in love with girls at age 12, I'm in big trouble. Nothing could be worse if you're a young Catholic kid, because then you got your family you're going to disappoint. You got God who hates you. You have the Catholic Church who just would, tie you up in a noose or burn you at a stake. It's a mess. So I thought, well, I better just kill myself right away. Then I don't have to tell people and make them all sad. So I wrote these little suicide notes, scrumpled them up and put them in the bathroom trash can, just for my own family. Dear everyone, it wasn't your fault. I was just born wrong. But I could never really quite figure out how exactly to do it. I practiced with a little razor blade at my wrist a little bit, but I thought, this is not how I want to do it. And right at the same time, my 6th grade teacher, Sister Helen Charles, was discovering that I was getting more and more depressed. And so she started a campaign of positive reinforcement, she called it. Called my mom. My mom told me the story 20 years later about the nun saying, your kid's depressed. I don't know why. She's got everything going for her. And so they did this campaign of affirmation for me. Oh, Jan Phillips, you're such a great scholar. You're such an athlete. You're so artistic. Please help me with the bulletin boards. And this went on week after week. And at first I thought she was a little bonkers. But I woke up one day and something had happened in that sad, sick little caterpillar. It turned into a butterfly. And that's the day I decided, oh my God, I am full of light. I am smart. I am a genius. I am a great athlete. I have to be a nun because nun saves kids' lives. And I want to save troubled kids' lives. So that was why I went into the convent. I decided at age 12, I went in at age 18. I was kicked out at age 20. I did not last long, but I loved it in there.
Well, it was like your own little sanctuary, right? Like you could meditate, you could worship, um, but then you fell in love, right?
Yeah, that was the trouble. I fell in love twice. I kissed two novices, the first year and the second year. And at the end of the second year, they called my parents. But
What does it feel like to be in a place that obviously doesn't support that, right? Either sexuality one, and being gay two. Like, how are you? What are you battling, like inside when you're in the convent and you're having these emotions? Like you're in love, not like you're not just attracted to another person. You're in love with another person. I mean, these poems, these clippings, and these notes that you're making for this individual, that is passion, that is love, that is intimacy. Like, what are you feeling when you're in this convent?
well, I wasn't too conflicted because I was not committed to obedience. Had I been afraid of getting kicked out, I probably would never have honored my love, but I did. And so it comes time when the superiors discover, aha, I see you two spending too much time together. And they made us promise never to look at each other, talk to each other, be with each other again. So I would have caved in and felt terrible, but because I did love them so much, I disobeyed the rules, snuck into the bedroom, spent the night in the arms of the novice that I loved. So it was just me deciding I'm going to be a grown up here. I'm going to make my own decisions. And I'm not worried one bit that this is sinful or awful. It wasn't sinful. There's nothing about love that is sinful. It was terribly disobedient of me. So that's why they threw me out.
Mm. And just kicked you out. Just called your parents, said, "Come get your daughter. Get your heathen daughter out of here."
His ass on it. Yeah, and I didn't know it was coming, and I think it was that shock that was the trauma that caused me to have, what's that, post-traumatic stress for 20 years.
But you still practice, right? Like your parents come pick you up, and you're still doing, you're
I
still.
tried to meditate, but it's very hard to be a monastic person in a secular world. And lots of changes in 2 years. Sexual revolution was going on. Women were dressing in these mini skirts. Everybody smoking pot. It was a whole different world. And I tried to live like a nun, only in so far as I would try to do spiritual reading and prayers in the morning and meditation. I maintained my relationship with the Catholic Church until they kind of excommunicated me. But it's really hard. I was living at home with my family and they do not get it. My dad never was a Catholic. And when I tell my mom, don't interrupt my prayers, if you smell incense, do not knock on my door, she goes, oh, okay. But it never permeated. So the phone would ring and she'd bust in, say, phone for you. So that's why I left and moved to California.
Freedom, right?
Freedom.
Freedom. Um, and that's where. When did you meet um your teacher, sister? Where she was a part? Was she a part of Birmingham? The
Robert
march that.
Joseph. Sister Robert Joseph was my high school English teacher in 65 when was the march to Selma.
Mhm.
She didn't even have us say prayers. She was an agnostic herself and already thinking about leaving the convent, but she was dedicated to the students. And so when we all stood up in every other class, you stay up and you stand up when the sister comes in and say prayers. In her class, she goes, none of that. And she hands out a mimeograph sheet of 5 poems. So on Monday, Emily Dickinson, Tuesday, E. Cummings, Wednesday, different poets every week. So we memorized poems as freshmen in high school. Yeah, and she went to be a social activist. She went to Selma and came back with the red dust of Alabama on the bottom of her habit. And she taught us by example how to be a social activist, how to speak out for others, how to show up.
Show up. When did you was it when you moved to California that you were openly gay? Like you accepted that as a part of yourself? Is that when?
Yeah, kicked out in 69 and 71, fell in love with my high school English teacher. Went to my first gay pride parade in Albany, New York. Stonewall was the first, and was the beginning of the word gay, finally a fun word, instead of bull dyke, Lezzie, faggot, it was a fun word. And there was like 500,000 people in the park in Albany. And it opened my eyes. And I finally said, oh, a tribe of proud people to belong to. It was my coming out to myself. I didn't come out to my family officially for another year, probably.
Well, you told your mother, right? And she was like, basically gave you the guilt trip of your, what is this going to do to your father kind of story, right?
He'll have a heart attack. You'll be at fault for his death. Yeah.
But I love your aunt's, what was it, her answer to that when you thought she was like the most, I don't know, maybe religious type, I guess, or she was really into the Bible and reading scripture. And like your mom went to go tell your aunt. And like she basically, like, your mom had this realization when she had her answer was
My
like,
aunt says to my mother, Jesus never said who to love. He said, love them all. You should be so proud of your daughter. She's brave enough to love who she loves. She's loving them all. Love your own girl, Marge. And my mom had an awakening that was physical and visceral, and tears started rolling down her face. And she said, I can't believe I've lived this long and been so stupid. And then she gave me permission to tell my dad, which I never did, because my dad and I never had a conversation longer than a minute. And he was a very private, introverted guy, didn't know what to make of the culture, never really quite fit in, was really shy. And I figured, why tell him? And she said he knows in his own way. Who knows?
Who knows? What's the difference between religious and spiritual?
Religion is an inherited body of beliefs, concepts. It's something handed down to us in the form of beliefs, and you sign up for it, you sign into it, and you let it be yours, because that's all you know. And it's all, when you're young, religion is just, it's installed like a software program. And then as we get older and start thinking for ourselves, we can create our own spirituality, which is not inherited. It's something created from our interior place of ethics and morality. And it's based on each of our spiritual paths, each of our own faiths. It's based on our ultimate commitments. According to this priest who taught us our first theology class in the convent. And it was very befuddling for all of us, because Catholic Church teaches you what to think. It's never helped in the matter of how to think. But the priest was dedicated to us creating a spirituality of our own based on our ultimate commitment. So it took him a whole semester. And by the end, I just followed the path of Jesus, who was pretty personally in my life, like a cool guy, like a brother. And I knew instinctively what he wanted us to do. So I said, then my faith, my spirituality is based on my commitment to be a light in the world, to be a stand for justice, to speak out for peace, to dissolve dualities, and to show up as a force for good. So when the church says we're not giving you absolution if you're going to continue to be gay, I said, go ahead, who cares? I have my own faith. So thank goodness for Father Grabis. I give him credit. Because otherwise, if your church rejects you, that's a terrible thing to be disinherited from.
Well, that's the end of life for some, isn't it?
I guess it wasn't for me. It was the beginning of life.
Hell yeah. What did it feel like when you went back? And I don't know if it's necessarily an apology, but it was an answer that you were looking for from the Catholic Church when you went back to that convent and you had that discussion, that conversation with that sister. What did that look like?
It was my last ditch attempt to kind of heal my heart, was what it felt like. I had such a hole that I couldn't live a whole life. I had a lot of rage, a lot of shame, a lot of guilt. I never had a vehicle or a way to get over it, being kicked out. And so I went to the woman who was the head honcho of the order. She was the superior of the whole mother house of 400 sisters, provincial director. I said, would you help me see if I can heal myself? Yes, sister, how would you like to try it? I said, I just want you to sit down and listen to me tell the story from 12 years old till now. I don't know if the telling of it with you as my witness will help, but I just need to try it. Because all the therapy I'd ever done, everything I tried to do never helped. So we sat there kind of knee to knee. I told my story, I cried, she didn't interrupt. At the end, there was this long moment of silence. I didn't have any expectations of her at all. But she says to me, sister, will you forgive me for the terrible injustice that was done to you on my watch? I said, yes. Yes, sister, I forgive you for that terrible injustice that was done to me on your watch. And then she says, will you forgive the entire community of the Sisters of St. Joseph of Carondelet for this terrible injustice that was done to you? I said, yes, sister, I forgive, da, 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 da. And at that moment, after I just blurted out my forgiveness, this whole wondrous light occurs, a whole new awakening. And this kind of voice from somewhere enters into me and says, there's nothing to forgive. At the same time, a new thought comes in, and I said to her, oh, sister, I should be thanking you for the privilege of 2 years of a monastic life. So there we succeeded in that moment of metamorphosis. I don't know what it had to do with anything. I don't know if it, because I hadn't been looking consciously for forgiveness, but I uttered those words in complete sincerity. And after I said it, that I was visited by angels who kind of whispered, hey, honey, there's never anything to forgive ever, because it all happens for you. So it was a big fat moment of light in my life back then. I think it was 1991 or something. So from 1969 to 1991, whatever, All those years I was in grief and mourning and sorrow. And when that moment occurred, that was the beginning of my resurrection
Mm,
as a light in the world.
mm. Wow. Experiencing union with that source. Like, when did you start transitioning from that traditional? Was it that at that point when you had that experience, did you start growing in your own spirituality, whatever that looked like?
It was shortly thereafter because I had been encouraged by a Catholic sister, kind of a psychic nun. She knows so much from so many arenas. She receives bulletins, right? So I call her up and I say, she says, go to grad school. I go to grad school and then I don't like it because I'm an outsider there. So I call her up telling her I'm going to quit. Thought I owed her at least that. So I go, I just wanted you to know I'm quitting grad school. And she was all against that whole idea. So she goes, hold on, girl, answer these 3 questions. And her 3 questions were, are you eating and drinking moderately? Well, my answer was no, because I'm drinking huge amounts of jug wine every night and, popping almond joy miniatures in my mouth every chance I get. Second question, what's your spiritual practice? My answer was none. I didn't have anything going on. Third question was, what are you doing for your body? That answer was nothing. So she stops me and she goes, don't you quit school yet. Get those 3 things handled and call me in 3 weeks and don't talk to me before. So I figured out that my spiritual practice would be 20 minutes in the morning in my bed, lying down, light a candle on the TV and at the bottom of my bed and just be a satellite dish. That's what I was going to be, a satellite dish to mind at large. And then I went out and bought a 12-speed bicycle and I started bicycling to school. And then my partner Annie and I started eating kind of plant-based meals and only drinking Chardonnay on the weekend. So 3 weeks go by. I call up Sister Paula and I say, you're not going to believe this, but everybody on campus has changed dramatically. And she lets out a huge yelp. And we both knew that all the change was inside me, but I didn't have to quit school. But it was the starting of the spiritual practice that changed everything. And now it's exactly the same. I have an altar at the foot of my bed. I bring in my coffee. I light my candles. I'm a satellite dish. I receive everything. I'm just there like a teacup waiting to be, divinity pours into me.
I gotta
And
ask, what do you receive when you're in that 20 minutes?
next moves, ideas, comfort, solace. I try not to be generative, but I'm such a creative maniac that it's very hard for me not to do all the talking. But every morning I reimagine my relationship to divinity because, that old Sistine Chapel image of God, the guy, the beard, the white hair, the cloud, all that is installed so feverishly that it's hard to get it out of your system. So every day I recreate my image of divinity as either the sea that I'm swimming in, the air, usually it's the air that I'm breathing. Usually it's just the air that's out here. I'm breathing in here in my lungs. So divine within, divine without. And I'm not saying that there's no enlightenment here. There's just a kid who sits down every day, lights a candle and sits there. Only now I do it for longer than 20 minutes, just because it feels so darn good. And sometimes I'm there for 45 minutes and I have other thoughts. I mean, I'm not giving a master class in how not to have thoughts. I just don't ever judge them. I
Mm.
don't ever say you're a lousy meditator. I always go, you're so great. Every day you do this practice. And ever since you have, your life has been blissful.
I mean, that is a form of enlightenment, right? Like, I mean, that's you sitting down with yourself and enlightening that source within inside of your like inside of you with information in your environment of reconnection, right? Plugging back into the source, plugging back into the system and receiving information like what to do next, intuitive moments in your life that you need to like maybe draw answers from. I mean, that's a source of enlightenment. To me, enlightenment isn't like, oh, I've got it all figured out. This is X, Y, and Z. I think enlightenment is just kind of like you keep chipping away that programming, that societal programming, there's dogmas, indoctrination. That's enlightenment because you're tapping back into who you truly are, that awareness, that beingness. And it's tough, like you said, like every day, like you're able to reconnect with the divinity that you imagine or believe it to be, or have faith that it is. Is that what is exactly is a mystic though, is my question.
A mystic, in my opinion, is anybody. You're probably a mystic, but anybody who has an unmediated relationship with the creative force, right? Unmediated relationship, no priest, no rabbi, no minister. Nobody's got to be there. You're directly in communion with your source. And, a Southern Baptist, I guess, I'm no judge of who's a mystic or not, but you only know for yourself. If you have a spiritual kind of intelligence that lets you in on the secret that nothing can ever be wrong, that everything is unfolding perfectly, that you are the particle version of the wave God, that it's all joyful, it's all to be celebrated. If you can know that and be firm in that and rooted in that, then you're a mystic.
Hmm.
If you let someone else be your spiritual authority, you're not.
You're giving away your power, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. People are going to listen to this and they're like, oh, Jan, that's great. That's awesome that you can say that. But what about me, who I go to work every day and I am just barraged with negativity from coworkers or a boss or family or neighbors or whatever? Like, yeah, I hear you, but my life does not reflect anything that you're talking about.
Remember how bullets bounced off Superman? There used to be
Yes.
a commercial called the Palm Olive Shield, right? And things would just bounce off. And that's what I feel like. As the more we meditate, the more our superpower develops so that we can deflect. I facilitate groups all over the country for what, 20, 30 years. I have gotten to the point where everyone's telling me their sad story. And it's not that it doesn't go directly into my heart, but it does not permeate my cells, and I just had a big book launch party out here today, and you go around from table to table and people are talking. I mean, we're aging. I'm 72. People are talking about their bodies, going wrong, and, heart and eyes going bad, teeth. People are always talking the bad news. I'm a news addict, so I listen to, news a lot. I listen to news a lot. And so I receive negative news. They don't ever, if it bleeds, it leads. That's what you learn in grad school as a photojournalist student. So I just have learned I kind of live in a non-dual state where if the idea comes into my mind, like that is a terrible, terrible thing, I quickly go to the other side of it because there's something redeeming about it. So it's a lot of cerebral, I'm rerouting my brain paths. I'm rewiring my brain so that I don't get dragged down by what is appearing as the dark, because dawn begins at midnight.
Hmm.
So, the Buddhist part, I was only Christian until I went to Japan. And there I'm exposed to Buddhism. I'm living in Buddhist monasteries. And the prevailing mentality there is everything is unfolding perfectly. Just sit down and reflect on the perfection of creation, as opposed to the mandate from the Christian church is go and teach all nations. So it's like you have the passivity of the East, you have the activity of the West, and the road to bliss is a pathway between those two things. That's the rapture road. And so we're straddling it constantly and always striving to evolve ourselves constantly. I'm constantly working in my mind. If I have a thought like, this shouldn't be happening, and I'm no saint on the freeways out here, I have a lot of opinions on who's a butthead and worse.
Mhm.
But immediately, right, it becomes clear that that's just peripheral. But on any deeper level, I can't be agitated.
Buttheads. Yeah,
But
buttheads.
and worse.
You talked about we are creators, like our true being in this book that really caught my eye. Like, there's a couple things I want to hit on before we end because it's, I mean, I keep losing track of time because I'm so deeply in love with your story. I think it's amazing. You talk about we are creators, we are co-creators, we are here to create, because I've always struggled with that, because like between the East and the West, you talk about Buddhism, right? Like they're talking about the four Buddha talked about the four what is it, the four something with suffering, the four principles or whatever, like desire is number one, right? Four paths, like desire is like one of the reasons why we suffer. But it's like my desires are coming from a place of like deeper than I am, where I want to create them, co-create them with source. So it's like, am I supposed to have this neutral mind where I just don't focus on my desires because they create suffering? Or do I kind of go with that naturalness inside of me that's like, man, let's just have fun, let's go create this? Like, does that make sense?
That's it. I think I have a song, I write music. I have a song called Follow Your Heart's Desire. And in my thinking, the desire is the greatest thing because it's our signal for where to go, what to do. It's the invitation, it's the magnet that's pulling us toward what we came on earth to do. So you look at, lately, I've had this thought that when we put together our heart's desire with that thing that's breaking our heart, that's how to create your life with those things. So we're called to be activists and to heal the wounds. And so the question is, what is it that's breaking your heart? Because, we could say rainforest burning, plastic in the ocean, whales and beasts in trouble, sonic waves hurting them, puppy mills, it goes on, right? So every one of us gets to say, what would you heal if you could? If you had a magic wand, what would you make different? Would you eliminate all the guns in the world? Would you get rid of atomic bombs? Would you stop the burning of the rainforest? You would do something different than I would. So when you identify that thing, I have a cousin who would just save puppies, right? So you figure it out. There's no right or wrong here. It's just like, that's your heartbreak. What's your heart's desire? What do you love to do? Well, I love to write. I love to create. I like to write poems. I like to travel. So, for example, when I read the book, The 100th Monkey, it so impressed me with the idea of causing cultural breakthroughs, evolutionary leaps, without even using language. I mean, that's a short little book, but it transformed my life one day. I read it on my lunch hour, and following my lunch hour, I went to the bank, gave the teller $20, and said, as soon as I get $5,000 in here, I'm going on a peace pilgrimage around the world. Because I believed that story in the book made me so inspired that we can cause change, not by just words, but through the power of our energy, the magic and the power of our intentions. And that's what led to me making a year-long peace tour around the world. My heartbreak was the nuclear proliferation that was going on when Ronald Reagan was president. He had this whole thing called Star Wars defense, and it was a mess. We had enough bombs. We and Russia had enough bombs to destroy the planet hundreds and hundreds of times. And that was the impetus. My heart's desire was to travel. I was a photographer with a slideshow on the peace movement, a slideshow on the women's movement. My heartbreak was nuclear arms around the world. So put those together, the combustion is an idea to make a peace pilgrimage around the world. Right? So that's how it works. So you need your heart's desire. And I mean, that's the big question. What do you love doing most? You do interviews. You're like Bill Moyers right there, even though you remind me of Matthew McConaughey, whatever. What's his name?
Matthew McConaughey.
Yeah. And so you are an interviewer because you love to create conversations of consequence. So somewhere in your heart's desire was like, I want to be responsible for creating global change. How will I do it? I'll make conversations available to people all around the world while I sit in my house, and you could have your, a fifth of Johnny Walker Red, right behind you. You could do it all in comfort and style. I don't know. Did you paint that painting that's behind you?
A buddy of mine did. I said I wanted a representation of life.
Yep, you got it. You got the candle burning. You have spirit. You got body. You got mind. You got it going on in spades.
Yes,
so
ma'am.
You're not in trouble. You have already identified. I don't know. What's your heartbreak?
Abandoned children.
There you go.
Yeah, abandoned children. Like, so when you were that part in your story about Africa, I think it was Africa, right?
Yeah.
That hurt me a little bit, right? Those children over there. But to see that experience, like I want to have my own orphanage one day. Like I want for abandoned children to be able to come and learn, be educated, to be loved, to be fed, to be clothed, to have a place of refuge, and to have an opportunity to experience something other than being alone, being in the cold, being not loved. That's what I want to do. That's what I'm going to do.
There you go. You sealed it right there. I'll see it with you. I'll add your name to my prayer book. I'll see it with you. You creating a safe space for kids in trouble who feel alone and abandoned. You can do that. I did it. There's a Living Kindness Learning Center in the middle of Nigeria, full of computers and software, African software that the kids are using, the organic farmers are using. There's apartments for 2 teachers on both sides, because I sat there just like you one day and said, I want to have something for those kids that wait all day for teachers to show up. And now the two teachers live in the apartments. They don't have to worry about roads and rain and rivers and getting there. They live there. You can do it. You will do it. That's your living spirituality. That's your ultimate commitment.
Ultimate commitment. I just, I can see it. I can see it. I can see it. I can feel it. You know, like
Good.
that's all about how we manifest, right? Like being in that moment, being and visualizing it and feeling it as being real. I mean, you talk about, like you just talked about your example there of manifesting that for yourself. Um, I think people get confused. I mean, they just, I don't know. They think that they read a lot of or watch a lot of YouTube about visualization and they want to get that Ferrari and they want to get the Lamborghini, but it's like, I think our power inside of us is just so much more divine than that, right? Like I just think you have to have all these other aspects of that before you can manifest. Like you got to have the visualization. I think you got to, I mean, it's got to be something you're very passionate about. It can't be something nonchalant like, oh, I want that pair of shoes. It's got to be like something like you're talking about, that deep desire where you said you had it, that's it, that moment, that clicking of your consciousness with reality, with your desire, with your intention, and that solidifies it in that moment. Like, I mean, I think that's, I think that's the magic. What are your thoughts?
I think the magic, I think what causes us to be great creators is the deepening of our relationship with the creative force. So I think the root of it is your what I would call spiritual practice, the commitment to sit quietly by yourself without your phone or your puppies for at least, I don't know, I would say even at least 10 minutes a day. If you do that, I'm guarantee you'll up it because the results are so noticeable. But I think that's the thing because, people make these vision boards. It's kind of practicing manifestation. But I made a vision board and it had on it a grand piano and a 4-wheel drive truck and Hawaii, and it didn't have a living kindness learning center in Nigeria, but I perfected my skills at visualizing and identifying my heart's desire in the secular realm, in the mundane, everydayness of our lives. Now I have a grand piano in my house and I just sold my 4-wheel drive truck a while ago. But that's the beginning of how does it work really. You see the thing, the idea comes forward in your mind. That's an implant from spirit. So spirit visited you and said, it's possible for you to do something for those kids who need you at this time. We get visited by spirit, and then it's in our brain and begins to move down to our heart. And those two things connect, all heaven breaks loose. And you're almost building the foundation by your words for the very center that you will create. It's our words, the word becomes flesh. So we create reality with our words, and you have spoken it to the world at large. You are taking responsibility to create a safe space for kids who need support. You might find it, you might build it, it might be, the thing will become available to you the more you say, I'm ready now, in your own practice. It will become apparent to you how to do that.
You referenced Jesus as that cool guy. What do you think he was trying to tell us?
Be kind, take care of each other, stand for justice, work with victims, And remember that you and that invisible force are the same thing. It got translated as I and the Father are one. But his original meaning, I'm sure, was, look at you guys, we're all part of it. We're the visible part of the great oneness. His words just got really messed with. I read, Neil Douglas Klotz works with, translations from his original Aramaic, and they're bold, they're beautiful, and I love it. And instead of saying, "Our Father who art in heaven," Neil Douglas Klotz says it could be translated like this: "Oh, holy birther, oh, maker of all things." Right? How does that feel next to "Our Father who art in heaven"? There's no life there. There's no vitality. But "oh, holy birther," there's no men on the cloud. There's no beard. It's like our invisible source. I have an invisible dance partner. That's just it. I don't mind. He's the fox in my trot.
What I'm trying to remember, your book is the one that said that Buddha, like, because you were talking to, I can't remember who you were talking to, but you're trying to find out more about the differences between Buddha and Jesus, right? And the guy said Buddha was the thought, Jesus was the action.
The guy said Jesus is the event of Buddha's thought.
What does that
First
mean?
came the thought, right? Like you have a thought center for troubled kids. That's Buddha, is the thinking. That's the East, the thought. East is contemplation. West is materialization, activation, right? So there's like one complete circle where you see divinity materializing, divinity becomes matter, and then matter material divinizes itself. So it's one complete cycle. Or even forget that, because nobody knows, it's just a bunch of words. But first we think about it, the Eastern thing, and then we act on it, the Western thing, and it becomes something real. 5 years from now, there will be a place identified as a place for troubled kids to feel safe. You will be the source of it. That's the thought becoming real. So the thought is the Buddhist thing. The real thing is the enfleshment of the thought, which is the Jesus being the event, Buddha being the thinker, Jesus being the event. Thought becomes real.
I love that. I really
once
do.
thought about interviewing me. You once had that thought. It felt good in your heart. You emailed me. We made it happen. Now people all around the world are going to see it because you had a thought about it that made you feel good.
Mm-hmm.
Now look, here we are in living color.
In living color, talking about some important subjects of self-realization. Before I let you go, I have to ask about your near death, because I'm into near-death experiences. I love Raymond Moody's work, Dr. Raymond Moody. Let's talk about that real quick, if we can talk about it real quick. So you're thrown from, you weren't thrown from a car. You had a car accident, correct?
No, I was leaning against the hood of my Subaru, photographing, videotaping some birds doing a kind of balletic dance up in Death Valley. And a guy who's driving an Econoline van at 75 miles an hour thought I was driving, and because he had just given himself a dose of insulin and his sensibilities were a little off, thought I was driving. So he crashes into the back of my car, even though I was in the breakdown lane, crashes into my car. So I get thrown into the field and then my car lands on top of me. I'm in the form of a crucifix on the ground. Car lands on top of me and impales me to the ground and I'm underneath the muffler. It's 100 degrees out and I'm already burned, 3rd-degree burns, and my back and my hip is burned away. And I can't get out of under the car. So I release. I was in and out of consciousness. And at one point I said, okay, here I go. And I released myself. I didn't know how it was going to work, but I kind of hear this little whoosh. And the feeling was that my soul left through the soles of my feet. And as soon as it did, my body's still there under the ground burning up. But my soul suddenly just feels real free. And the me of me is in this very floaty, black, dark, peaceful place. I didn't see lights and tunnels and ancestors, but I was in a very floaty, peaceful place, having the thought, ooh, this is a little different than I thought, but I'm liking this. So peaceful, liking it. And then I hear these 2 voices shouting, oh my God, is somebody there? Is anybody alive? And then it was like, whoosh, right back in. I hadn't gone out far enough that I couldn't be called back in. So I re-enter my body. These 2 guys are there and I just see their skinny little legs. They woke me out of wherever I was and they say, wait there, we'll go get help. And I knew I was a goner then. If they were going to leave me, I'd never survive. So this voice comes through me that says, you are the help. Just lift up the car. And they were sure they couldn't. They go, no, we're not strong enough. And the voice got more booming and goes, you are the help. Lift up the car. It was like not even my voice. And they did. Car lifts up. The guy that hit me by this time has come over and pulls me out from under the car. And then we wait there for the ambulance. They just put me on the ground. So I learned something that day, which was really important, because all our lives we've been taught we're not the help. I can't do this. I have to go to God. Someone says, I'm sick, pray for me. Oh, okay, I'll pray to God. Instead of going over to the house, put your hands on them and healing them, right? Because that's our conditioning. God will help. Help is out there. And so what I learned that day was that we are the help. And that will take a massive reconditioning of human beings' consciousness to really affirm that and go along with it and make of our healthcare system something that's holy and human.
Oh,
That's the near-death story.
I love it. I love it. How can people buy this book, Still on Fire, and find out more about you, Jan?
Well, they can get it on my website at Unity Online or even on Amazon. But I would, even if they go, because they get free shipping at Prime, I'd say go to my website and get on my mailing list. It's janphillips.com, because then you're in my circle. And then I send you things. I send you a newsletter every month. And on Sunday mornings, I send out this little pickup that's called Bulletins from Immortality. Because I don't know if you get it yet, Trey, but Emily Dickinson once said in a poem, the only news I get is bulletins all day from immortality. And so I call my little Sunday message, it's always short, Bulletins from Immortality, in honor of Emily Dickinson. So you will continually get me breathing life into you until you're capable of matching up your heart's desire with your heartbreak, figuring out what action to take in the world, and understanding that that is the pathway to purpose and joy for all of us here.
Perfectly said. Jan Phillips, Still on Fire. Thank you
You
for joining
betcha.
the show.
You're a great interviewer. You were born for this.